doing of this play?
It's time to look over some unforgettable collections of savagery and satire. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 anthology horror movies. For this list, we're focusing specifically on horror anthologies consisting of numerous short stories in one feature film, which means that horror flicks with only one central narrative didn't make the cut. Number 10, Kaidan. It's an art house flick whose name literally translates to ghost stories, and it will literally make you wet yourself from pure terror.
このよしを我が君に権状をつかまつり、この耳を証拠に持ち帰って、そうじゃ、我が使命を果たせし証となすべし。
Directed by Masaki Kobayashi, Kaidan consists of 4 creepy chapters based on Japanese folklore that Roger Ebert called, quote, an assembly of ghost stories that is among the most beautiful films he'd seen. It's an artistic way of ravaging your brain with haunting images and sounds. Only the brave dare watch Kaidan. But given that it won the special jury prize at the 1965 Cannes Film Festival, probably worth your time. Number 9, Twilight Zone, the movie.
That's Sarah, my other sister. She was in an accident.
Before this film was even released, it already carried an enormous amount of weight based on the reputation of Rod Serling's iconic TV series.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
And after Vic Morrow and 2 child actors were killed in a helicopter crash while filming, it took on a whole new level of notoriety. Even so, most horror anthologies don't enjoy the luxury of having names like Steven Spielberg as one of the directors. Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks starring in a prologue segment directed by John Landis is another highlight.
What are you doing?
Plus, Twilight Zone alumnus Burgess Meredith steps in as narrator, tying these distinct and eerie tales together.
You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
Number 8, Dead of Night.
Mr. Craig, can you describe what happens in your dream?
Well, not in detail.
Are you one of those tough guys or gals that can't stand to watch older films?
You can't be such a skunk.
Perhaps you're right, old man.
Well, sit down, get this film rolling, and prepare to have your soul thoroughly wrecked by the film that popularized the anthology style for horror flicks. Released around the conclusion of World War II, Dead of Night caused audiences to slowly but surely drop their jaws as Michael Redgrave's ventriloquist freaked them the heck out.
You ought to get your head examined. Good night.
Key, my friend, don't leave me.
Martin Scorsese actually named Dead of Night as one of the scariest horror films of all time.
Take a seat, sucker. What's biting you, sucker?
If you think older films are boring, this British anthology will prove you wrong. Number 7, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. Based on stories by Stephen King and Arthur Conan Doyle, this anthology features Blondie singer Debbie Harry, as well as a young Julianne Moore, Steve Buscemi, and many others. Now that's some serious star power.
What does it say? I have no idea.
Together, they act out stories about mummified students, evil cats, and killer gargoyles, which are all tied together under the guise of stories a boy is telling to the witch who's prepping him for dinner.
What are you doing?
Just preheating to 350.
Help!
Critics didn't exactly praise Tales from the Dark Side, but it made us cry like a bunch of little kids, and is still destroying dreams years later. So, obviously did something right. Number 6. Asylum. When it comes to horror films, the 70s had it going on, as most of the decade's anthologies were sick, and we mean that in a good way. Asylum was one of those films, and with a horror director extraordinaire like Roy Ward Baker guiding the action, it was one of the most polished genre productions of its time. Of course, it helps to have actors like Peter Cushing, Charlotte Rampling, and Britt Ekland in your corner, all of whom were unforgettable as characters destined to be terrorized for our personal entertainment. Whether their stories involved voodoo, magic suits, crazy ladies, or mannequins coming to life. Number 5. VHS 2. Well, here's an anthology that requires a stiff drink and possibly a few painkillers. And if you're familiar with the segment known as Safe Haven, then you know what we're talking about. As the sequel to the original 2012 anthology, VHS 2 beholds the same found footage narrative that shows unsuspecting people being systematically slaughtered. Okay, maybe that's a bit harsh, but, well, it's the truth. It's deeply disturbing and unsettling. An anthology that pushes the limits of how to entertain audiences in sick fashion. Number 4. Tales from the Crypt.
You crazy fool! Do you want to get yourself killed?
Yet another 70s creep fest from Amicus Productions. This Freddie Francis film centers on a group of tourists unfamiliar with a deadly fact.
Well, there's no way out of here. Let's go back.
The Crypt Keeper reinforced the idea with his charming presence and remarkable storytelling abilities, describing the visitors' deaths to them in great detail.
What did he see?
What's more important is what you will see.
Well, who are you? What do you want with us?
To warn you of what may happen.
In the end, the 5 chilling tales of Tales from the Crypt left an indelible mark on all those who embraced the darkness.
What have you done?
I wished him alive again forever.
But don't you realize he's been embalmed? His veins are filled with embalming fluid burning into him.
Oh, no.
Hypnotic. And with clear morals at the end of the stories, this campy anthology based on the EC Comics stories will leave you trembling by the end.
Who's next? Perhaps you?
Number 3. Black Sabbath.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Entitled I Trevolti della Paura in its native Italian, Mario Bava's Triptych of Terror was influential not only in the realm of film, but also to a band that went on to innovate heavy metal.
Mama, I'm cold. Mama, let me in. Let me.
As Europeans had a little more leeway when it came to horror aesthetics, the violence and sexuality of Black Sabbath shocked Americans upon first viewing.
Who is this speaking? Who?
Don't you know? Think, Rosie. How nice you look with that towel around you. You always did have a beautiful body.
So much so that a young director named Quentin Tarantino was inspired to apply a similar concept to a film that would become Pulp Fiction.
Well, you gotta have an opinion. I mean, do you think that God came down from heaven and stopped? Oh, what's happening? Oh, man.
Blessed by the presence of horror icon Boris Karloff, it proved to be a sophisticated and well-written film that's a great way to kick off any horror anthology marathon. Number 2, Trick or Treat.
Wrap it around.
But don't forget to help me with the ice.
One year before Anna Paquin began her run on HBO's True Blood, she starred in a horror anthology that failed miserably at the box office.
What did he do to you? I listened to their advice and played hard to get. He bit me.
However, Trick or Treat has since become one of the most critically acclaimed horror anthologies of recent years, thanks to the collection of spooky Halloween tales and one little burlap sack-wearing weirdo. Produced by Bryan Singer, this horror gem has earned itself a cult following while reminding audiences to obey the Halloween tradition, unless you want to become someone's holiday treat. Before we unveil our top pick, here are some honorable mentions.
Keep your eyes straight ahead. Keep walking to the car.
Number 1, Creepshow. After decades of legitimately frightening horror anthologies, filmmakers began to take a more satirical approach.
This is going to be extremely painful, Mr. Barrow.
And no one was better suited to pull that off with appropriate levels of reverence than the godfather of all zombies, George A. Romero. For Creepshow, he teamed up with writer Stephen King and a slew of well-known actors for a 5-story anthology about weird kids and plenty of comedic horror.
Father's Day, and I got my cake. Happy Father's Day.
In fact, Stephen King's own son starred as the creepy kid that would have his vengeance. Creepshow marked a new era of horror anthologies, and, much to the joy of horror fans, a sequel arrived in theaters 5 years later.
Help! It hurts! It hurts!
Do you agree with our list?
Boy, they were scary. They were great.
What's your favorite anthology horror movie? For more mind-blowing top 10s published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.